Welcome to the Coaching Crowd podcast with me, Jo Wheatley, and my friend and co-host, Zoe Hawkins.
Hello, everybody. Good to be here for another podcast episode. And today we're bringing you something a little bit different because Jo and I wanted to do an episode on the coaching books that have influenced our coaching journey and our coach education, and just share some of our favorite reads with you and some insights from some of those books. We know that many of you interested in coaching will have your own books that you're reading, so we thought we'd contribute and add some of ours.
And of course, we hope that one of those books is Deciding to Coach, the book that we wrote. They'd been in our minds for many, many years and released earlier on this year. So if you haven't checked it out already, please do. You'll find it in your normal places you go to find books. Yeah, so where should we start, Zoe?
I thought I would start with not your typical coaching book, but with Atomic Habits from James Clear, which I know many people love. And I think sometimes you enter into a coaching journey through a back door, don't you? You get hooked on sort of personal development and start learning about personal effectiveness. And I really like the book Atomic Habits because it's just so practical. We love the cover. We love how it's written.
I was just going to say, I love the cover.
I know it was an influence, wasn't it, when we were writing our book, when we were looking at how James had put together, just his framework and his structure. It's very easily digestible. And ultimately, what I like about Atomic Habits is it is coaching. It's essentially taking somebody that has a problem and giving them lots of different methods and ways that they can apply these little hacks and fixes in their life. And I just really like it as a starting point, an entry point for coaching and what coaching is capable of and how it can help to influence people's thinking. So that would be probably one of the ones that I would put on a reading list for sure if I was interested in coaching.
Yeah, and of course, Coactive Coaching is a book that we recommend to people that are joining our coaching courses. And the reason that we recommend it is because it's packed full of value, of theory, but in a really digestible way. So I would recommend that you check that one out.
What I like about that one is it has lots of conversations around what coach says, what client says, because I think there are some coaching books that will talk about obviously different methods and different tools, but this one actually gives you examples of how those play out in conversation. And so when you're starting with coaching, it just makes it really, really practical and accessible.
Well, it even came with a DVD when we bought it, or CD all those years ago when we bought it, and also having lots of things in the appendix as well. So it really is practical, trying to equip you with that genuine insight. I think we also share as well with people, obviously, Simon Sinek, Start With Why. It's a great book to be getting you to think about, why would I be interested in coaching? How would it relate to my purpose? And anything that has a model that you can play off, Zoe and I as theorists, like, okay, great, let's look at that. Let's see how that applies. What would we add to that model if we were interested in it? So, and you can't talk about coaching books without, of course, talking about Sir John Whitmore, who's often thought of as a founder of coaching. So he has a great book called Coaching for Performance, and that talks you through the GROW model, which for many people, when they do their first training in coaching or bite-sized piece, maybe in an organization, will come across GROW as that what appears to be a very simple 4-step model, but there's a lot of art really to using that well. And in fact, our GROW video demo on our YouTube channel, on the Ingood Company YouTube channel with Jo Wheatley and Zoe Hawkins, is our highest ever viewed video by a long, long way. So if you want to see a demo of that, go and check that out on our YouTube channel.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the thing with that book, is it shows you just the depth that coaching can go to. As you said, the model itself, GROW, is incredibly simple, but the application of it can be really sophisticated. And I think that's true of many, many different coaching models and tools. It's one of the reasons we advocate doing a coach training program, because whilst it can look quite simple on the surface, coaching, once you get under the skin of it, you realize there's a huge amount of skill involved in coaching. And I think, John Whitmore's book there does that really well by unlayering all the different sort of possible complexities to something that looks very simple. So it's a great read if you're starting out and wanting to learn more about coaching. I think one of the texts that we also recommend and I enjoyed reading was NLP at Work. So NLP is neuro-linguistic programming. It's one of the methodologies that we obviously teach on our program or introduce people to on our program. And NLP is there to be able to learn about linguistics, so we can hear more in our clients' language about where some of their blocks or challenges and also opportunities may be. Obviously, there's the bit about the programming, which is all about different strategies and goals that we can set ourselves to help us to reset our thinking and also reset our behaviors. And if you couple that with James Clear and Atomic Habits, then, there's personal effectiveness and a nice little toolkit for you. And the neuro piece, right, is understanding how the brain works and, how as coaches we can understand some of that to be able to support our clients. And I like the fact that it's got the application in the work context, because many of our coaches coming through the programs will be taking their coaching into the work sector, but also everybody pretty much works that is coming to coaching. They have their own job, they have their own business, whatever it might be. And so it's a great context to be learning NLP as well.
Yeah, Joseph O'Connor is a great author in that area. And we've also got the Coaching with NLP, which is really, again, a great practical book to start to help coaches get some insight into, usually people will do a sort of foundational coaching training, whether that's a level 3, a level 5 or a level 7 kind of equivalent. And then they'll decide after that, do I want to do a specialist piece of CPD now? But it's great to have that introduction into NLP in those early stages of your coaching training.
Moving slightly away from pure coaching books, I know both you and I have read a number of books by Julie Hay, and one that I particularly like is about reflective practice and supervision for coaches. It actually covers a huge amount of different coaching tools and techniques. Yeah, there it is. If you're watching us on our YouTube channel, you can take a look at the book Jo just flashed up there. But for those of you listening, check out Julie Hay as an author. She's got a number of books and is a very accessible author that breaks things down into very simple terms. And this book, Reflective Practice and Supervision, uses many of the concepts that we come across in coaching, but also shows how we as practitioners can develop our reflective practice skills already using many of the things that we learn. So I certainly enjoyed reading her book.
If we stick with the names, I also would say Julie Starr is a great author in the field of coaching books, right? It's very accessible books, lots of examples of scripts like Zoe mentioned earlier on. So, and small books, so you feel when you pick it up, you can read it in a reasonable amount of time. Sometimes you pick a book up, you think, oh my goodness, how long is this going to take me to read? And it can be hard to get started. So I think it's about finding that balance of what is accessible. I also, if maybe I'm jumping ahead here, but I think for experienced coaches or those people that are in the coaching world, I often recommend to coaches to read about coaching supervision. Not necessarily because you want to train to be a coach supervisor at that time or in the future, but more because on that reflective practice vein that you were just talking about, Zoe, I think it really helps to deepen your ability to reflect effectively, to learn more and more about who you are, how you coach, give you different lenses on human behavior and human psychology, and can be really stimulating to help you get a bit more creative in your coaching practice as well. So, it's also books here like, so Eric Dehan is a great author, I think, in this area. And he's got this book, Being Supervised, which is a guide for supervisees. And I think that is often a missing piece. We can read a lot about how to be a great coach, but what about reading books about, for coachees? And are there, coachees often might be interested in learning or reading more about coaching whilst they're being coached by you. So, having those recommendations or books and always looking at your coaching practice through the eyes of the coachee, I think is really critical.
Yeah. And I think, taking a step sideways again, yes, reading into supervision, reading into how to be a great supervisee and for our coachees as well, to be able to lean into that. Then I think you've also got like different modalities that you can start to read into, like some books that I came across quite early on. There was a book called, I think it was The Journey by Brandon Bays. She's developed a methodology for doing deeper work with a client, helping clients to resolve sort of past relationships where they might be holding on to different emotions. And whilst you may not use these techniques in your coaching, it may feel that it's a bit out of scope for you. Actually, being able to read around different topics like that, different modalities that people have developed of their own, might help to inspire you around where might you take your own coaching and what sort of work do you want to do with your clients. Obviously, in neurolinguistic programming, you also learn about timeline therapy, and there is a book on that which accompanies the program when you go to learn it. That's about kind of deeper releasing of emotional blocks as well. So again, it may not be something you choose to use, but knowing that these things are out there which can help to accompany the training that you are doing, you know, the journey that you're on yourself, I think can really help to to bring your skills and your competencies along.
Yeah, I really recommend reading about getting a more systemic view of the world, because yes, coaching an individual can be extremely powerful, but we also need to be conscious about the fact that that individual is interconnected with so many other people in their lives that are going to influence that. So they might make a decision to change a behavior, and that may either be accepted or rejected by some or all of those different systems around them. So John Whittington is a great author in this area, a very accessible book called Systemic Coaching and Constellations. Again, it's very practical, broken down into really understandable chunks, and explains a bit about where the theory around constellations comes from. That's a great one. You might also, I think a lot of people will be familiar with Nancy Kline, Time to Think. That's a much loved book and concept, and we use principles of that in one of our modules on our coaching training program to really help people with the discipline around and the art around how to hold silence to enable clients to break through their own limitations. So empowering clients in that way. And sometimes it's about coaches getting out of the way of the coachees. And so that's a really great one, written in a really, really nice way. And then if you were thinking about, Zoe was saying, the other modalities, Gestalt is something that I really like. The principles within Gestalt, and the first Gestalt book I came across was Gestalt Counseling in Action by Patricia Clarkson. So definitely worth at least Googling Gestalt and seeing, you know, what books and what reviews there are now about books that have come out in that area. And that's really, again, relates to this idea of like foreground and background, and thinking about, as a coach, how sometimes, you know, we meet our clients where our clients are at, but there are times for us to fade away and, you know, make sure that the client is in the foreground, and also times where in the dynamic of that relationship to support the coachee, we might need to actually, you know, come more into that space. So perhaps an area worth looking into.
Yeah. And obviously we have a reading list on our coaching program. And sometimes I think when people are coming onto a coaching program, they can feel a lot of pressure to have to do all of the reading. I think there's something like 20 books on our reading list. And, you know, the reading lists that accompany our program and many others, I'm sure, are often there as a reference guide for you long into the future, as well as part of your program. They're a chance for you to sample different perspectives from the different authors. Many of the, obviously, people who are writing coaching books are coaches themselves. So they have a huge amount of experience and practice to bring through their writing. So it's an opportunity for you to explore different styles of coaching that is out there, the different perspectives on coaching. And I know for me, I often dip in and out of coaching books. So for any of you sat that can watching this, behind me is often my bookshelf. Now, have I read every single book on that bookshelf? No, but have I read chapters from every single book? Yes. And I tend to dive in and out of them, depending on perhaps what I'm thinking about, what my clients are bringing, the different topics that come up. So, you know, a reading list is there for you to enjoy. The books are there for you to enjoy. It's not there as a pressure to have to get through and read all of the books all of the time. It's there to complement your learning and, you know, the journey that you're on as a coach.
And there are different ways to access books as well now, aren't there? Of course, you can listen to them through Audible, or is it Blinklist or Blinkfist, which is a place where they actually just give you the summaries of the books, in about 20 minutes, I think, or some shorter period of time. So quite efficient way to access them. And of course, you don't have to read books at all. There are podcasts like you're listening to now, around coaching. There are also videos on YouTube around coaching as well. So depending on how you best take in and digest information about coaching, you go with what suits you, really. But we thought that for today, it would be good just to mention a few of the authors or the books or the areas that have stimulated us, really. And when my reading went, whether you call it slightly outside of coaching or inside of coaching, but I trained in grief work a few years ago, and a pivotal book for me reading about that was the Grief Recovery Handbook, which has a full program in it, very accessible, again, easy to read within a relatively short amount of time. So whilst people might not think of it, strictly speaking, as a coaching book, I think it's highly relevant for coaching work, because when clients are making changes in their lives, it requires them to let go of certain things and welcome in new things, and that can create a sense of loss or an experience of loss, whilst they're also focusing on what it is that they want to gain.
Yeah, and I think these things, like I said, even if you don't use them in your coaching, they inform you as a practitioner. So they make you more aware of the different experiences that clients are having, the vast size of the field of work. Something that is a step away from what you mentioned there, but 5 love languages is another concept and book. And this is something I don't use in coaching, but I will absolutely introduce a client to it if I think that it is relevant for them. So if they're talking about relationships and they're talking about recognition, I might introduce them to that book so they can go in their own time and go and explore it and find out for themselves. Same as grief. If I know a client is on a journey of grief, yes, it's unlikely that that's going to be something that we'll touch on too much in the coaching, but I will always provide clients with different references that I think will serve them in their journey. And I think as practitioners, we'll all do that. The more we coach, the more we read, the more we come across that's useful for our own personal journeys, we're able to refer those on to our clients as well.
So that's probably been a little bit of a popcorn bounce around of different books that have inspired us. I think that's how most conversations go. When you talk to people about books, somebody will say, "Oh, I read this book, I loved it. You should take a look at it." And then the other person says, "Yes, hey, and what about this book?" And it's wonderful, the excitement that can come when you find a book that really resonates with you. And sometimes maybe you read a book where you think, "Oh, I don't know if I quite get this." And lots of people have that experience with books around transactional analysis, which is a theory of psychology that we use a lot in our coaching. Are the books easy to read? Absolutely not. In my experience, it's a book that book or content that I need to read a number of times to really digest. But that can be just as useful. So sometimes it does require you to persevere or break it down into those smaller bite-sized chunks.
Absolutely. And over in our coaching crowd group on Facebook, which if you haven't joined, please do, we have a weekly thread where people are sharing different resources, and we'll often see new podcasts or new blogs or new books even being recommended on that thread. So if you're somebody who's looking to keep topping up your reading list or keep topping up your resource list, come and join us in that group. And of course, as Jay mentioned at the start, if you haven't got our book yet, please head over to Amazon and buy that. It's Deciding to Coach by Joe Wheatley and Zoe Hawkins. And our book focuses on helping you to make the decision to step into the coaching industry, if that decision is right for you, and also how you can build a thriving coaching business if that is the decision that you choose to take. And regardless of whether you've already made the decision to coach and are already coaching, what our book also does is show you, the reader, and also coaching practitioners, how to coach somebody through making an important decision. Because often when we're looking at decision making, coaches can get stuck because they're looking at it from the angle of helping the client to decide pros and cons, whereas decision making is a very sophisticated process, you know, it's a psychological process. And our book breaks down how we would support clients in making a critical decision that is right for them. So it's a book that has a number of different angles to it, and I would encourage you to get yourself a copy and take it on holiday with you wherever you might be heading next.
The last thing I'd like to share is I believe that there is a high likelihood that there is somebody, I actually believe all of you have a book inside of you, and you might have the next best-selling coaching book in you that hasn't yet been written, and it might be part of your journey as an individual or as a coach. And Zoe and I, having finally launched or published our first book, already have that itching, tingling feeling of the next book coming. So perhaps also take some time to reflect on what is the book that is in me.